The following program contains the views and opinions of the hosts, speakers, and participants. They do not reflect the policies of the producers, advisors, and advertisers of Paws Radio, including Adelphi University's Board of Trustees, administrative faculty, or its affiliates. Paws web radio station encourages freedom of speech, but does not endorse any specific viewpoints or messages. Listener discretion is advised, especially for potentially sensitive or controversial topics.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Earle Lab, where we talk about all things neuroscience here at Adelphi. I'm your host, Hemish, a junior molecular neuroscience major. In today's episode, we're going to be bringing it back to studying, but this time, instead of talking about how to study better, which I sort of touched upon a little bit in episode 2, we're going to focus on how we can stay locked in and how we can prevent ourselves from being distracted while studying and instead focus on what's on hand in front of us. So, one of the biggest issues that we as college students face when studying is, of course, trying to stay focused, not trying to procrastinate, and not trying to become too distracted. Trying not to look at memes for like 2 hours straight and end up getting no work done. So, as with all things that I talk about on this podcast, that's a lot easier said than done. There are distractions everywhere in our lives, and that's become more true tenfold thanks to advancements in social media on our phone. Now, I'm not trying to sound like a boomer or a professor. Your phone is not like this evil entity that's out to like destroy your life. However, it is a fact that I think most of us realize that certain apps and content are all vying for our attention. They're all competing for our attention, and that in turn makes it harder for us to get our work done. So it is no secret that pretty much almost every college student uses at least one major social media app, whether that be Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, X or Twitter, or even Facebook if you're into that. And nowadays, all of these social media platforms have at least some form of short form content, so like 10 to 15 second short videos. Obviously, you have Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, that's just what it's all about. Even Twitter, just like going through tweets really quickly. And short form content, in my opinion, is one of the biggest reasons behind this current sort of widespread issue of college students not being able to study enough. Because unlike with other distractions, short form content can go on forever and leave you really exhausted afterwards. So what do I mean by that? So you guys have obviously all seen like your Reels or your TikToks with some sort of video on like one half of your screen and Subway Surfer gameplay on the bottom half. Probably also seen a bunch of memes about that. And that sort of really encapsulates what short form content is all about and what it's really great at. It specializes, as I said before, in capturing our attention and sort of short-circuiting our attention spans. So the main basis behind short form content like Reels, right, we see something interesting, we laugh to it, we just exhale, like it. And then after we get bored, right, typically like after a few seconds of watching the Reel and we're ready to move on, right, we get a Reel or a short right after that. And because we can sort of process and go through this content so quickly, there's always something novel and engaging to recapture our interest at a heightened level of neural arousal. So it makes us either makes us laugh, makes us feel happy, makes us feel bad. And I'll get into the bad part in a moment. And when you have all of this media, right, coming to you all at once, and you can get something new to sort of satisfy your like short-term stimulation, it becomes very addictive. Not necessarily like a flat-out addiction, but it has addictive symptoms, and it's difficult to break out of. One of the worst offenders of this is doom scrolling. So doom scrolling is when you see a lot of negative news through short-form content, right? And this piques our morbid curiosity. So you see either like in your feed, either like a car accident or like really bad news, maybe like political news, or just something that really makes you frustrated, really infuriates you and grinds your gears. This is deliberate. As I said before, doom scrolling, it's like a psychological phenomenon that preys upon our most primal mechanisms of attention, right? Our brains are always trying to recognize any stimuli, visual, auditory, whatever that may be, that could be potentially threatening, right? Because that's what it wants to prioritize in ancient times, right? That's like how we would recognize threats to avoid it. But now, doom scrolling sort of uses that to its advantage by making us even more attentive, right? By raising our neural arousal even more than what other types of short form content can. So what that leads to is that for hours and hours, all right, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, you're just constantly scrolling through these reels. You're doom scrolling. Your brain becomes overstimulated. The neurons in your brain are constantly firing, trying to process and remember all this information that they're just not designed to be able to handle, right? I briefly mentioned back in episode 2 when I talked about memorization and studying, your memory is very limited. So when you have all this information coming in at once, it's essentially just overstimulation, overload. You also obviously, of course, feel a little bit down emotionally because when you see all this bad news back to back to back to back and hardly anything else, and also since this is the news and the short form content that your brain chooses to memorize out of anything else, you come out of it feeling just a little bit depressed, a little bit solitary, and you also feel exhausted, right? Trying to process all this information leaves your brain tired and leaves yourself tired consequently. So you have a big exam tomorrow, right? You've wasted 2 to 3 hours scrolling through Instagram, hopefully looking through cat videos, but most likely looking at like some sort of like, I don't know, accident footage. And at the end, you're fatigued. Your mind is too exhausted to study. So, all right, how can we work around this? How can we solve this, right? This is such a universal problem. What can we possibly do to address it? So, as with all things, there isn't really a copy and paste cure, but from my own experience and also just from general psychology and neuroscience info, we can sort of piece together some sort of plan to circumvent these problems. So first, let's address that your phone, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, is your friend. It's your friend for studying. It can play music, which can keep you focused. More on that in a sec. It helps you stay connected with people, helps you find information for studying. So spending a lot of time on your phone isn't necessarily a sign of concrete addiction, right? Doom scrolling and short form content is meant at its core to be addictive, and it takes advantage of our evolutionary attentive instincts. So don't feel bad if you do it often, because literally everyone does, whether they admit it or not. If you do find yourself doom scrolling more often to the point where you're procrastinating maybe more than you originally intended, and you can't study enough or you're too exhausted to study, here are some simple, I would say more like treatments that you can begin implementing or at least thinking about. So the obvious one, right? When you start studying, you can just set your phone aside. If you get a lot of calls or messages, or if you're worried that someone might need you in an emergency, you can always still leave it on, like enable notifications for text or emails or all that. Just set it away from you, so that way if you get distracted from studying for a few seconds or a few moments, you don't instinctively go on your phone, open Instagram, and scroll through reels for an hour. A second solution, if you do want your phone a little bit closer to you, you can set a lot of phones, again, both iPhones and Androids have a feature where you can set timers for apps. So let's say on a day where you know you need to get studying done, maybe set like a 30-minute timer for Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. So that way you know that the time that you have to use this app is limited, and sort of incentivizes you to, if you do end up using these apps, scrolling through short form content, messaging people, they only do it for a short amount of time in short bursts. So there's more studying being done in between. And obviously it stops yourself from procrastinating for extended durations. The last potential solution, and the one that I've used a lot, that I found the most success with personally, is using a mode or routine on your phone. So these are like specific settings. Again, these are on both iPhones and Android, where you can set up a routine, say like studying or work, and you can choose which apps are disabled and which apps are allowed. So for me, when I study on my phone, I have a studying mode or a studying routine where I disable all my social media apps, but I still enable my text, my calls, my email apps, and if I need to like look up stuff like Google and all that. So I can still have my phone by me, and obviously Spotify for listening to some music. So I can still have my phone by me. I don't have to worry about missing out on someone trying to get in touch with me, but I'm also, I sort of like set up a mental roadblock for myself, where I know that, all right, social media is off limits. I just got to get studying done. The sooner I'm done, the quicker I can go back to scrolling. So I think it's the most balanced solution, and one that people should experiment with, because you can tweak it. You can tweak the settings so whatever works best for you. So let's say if you do need Instagram to message people, you can still leave that on, but disable like TikTok, and so on. Okay, so that is my personal advice for trying to deal with doom scrolling on social media. Um, Obviously, there are other distractions while studying. The most other obvious one being having noisy family, noisy friends, or a noisy roommate if you're living in the dorms. So the most obvious solution, just try to talk with them, communicate with them, let them know when you want to study, what time, what day. See if you guys can work out a plan so that your schedules don't conflict with each other. And then, of course, if they do, right, you guys can decide on a time or a place to reschedule. A more practical solution is to invest in noise canceling earbuds or headphones. Obviously, these can be quite pricey, but I would say it's worth saving up for it, and you don't have to get like anything high end. Just a budget noise canceling earbuds or headphones will do. So that way you can study in like the Nexus or even like the UC or the science building, and you can study in peace. Right? They block out all of this noise, and whatever little noise they don't block out, you can filter it out by playing some sort of song. This is really helpful if you can't really pick and choose where you need to study on campus. And on the topic of music, right, if you find yourself even like when you're studying in silence, right, if you're one of the people where if you're in silence, your brain just sort of like races around and you get a lot of thoughts that sort of distract you. Playing some calming music, right, would it be like chill pop or even like lo-fi, or even to more relaxing like and less hyped EDM, I would say either one of those genres, whatever works best for you, is a great way to get your brain slightly stimulated, right? Help your brain achieve a moderate level of arousal, and that way you can pay attention. So there's actually a concept in psychology where sometimes you do need your brain to be, as I said before, stimulated slightly, aroused to a certain level slightly for you to pay attention. Because if it's obviously too aroused, you get distracted, and if there's not enough arousal, then your brain instead fills in the gaps by thinking about something, or you just simply get a little bit restless. So music is a great study aid. Find a genre that puts you most at ease, makes you feel most relaxed, and just create a playlist. And then if you're the opposite, where you need pure silence to study, take the time, whenever you're free, find a time or a spot on campus or just around your neighborhood, like in a local library that doesn't have a lot of people. Obviously, this will be like after morning hours, more into the evening, and on the more secluded areas of campus is taking breaks. So we are not robots. We are not academic weapons, even no matter how much we try to be. We need breaks. Thinking, like literally, the act of thinking, right, requires firing from our neurons and the formation of new synaptic connections, which uses ATP, a form of energy. You burn calories just by thinking. It is exhaustive, obviously, for your brain, but for your body as a whole. So always ensure that you can incorporate breaks into your studying schedule. The most common break-taking technique that's known is the Pomodoro technique, and by all means, if that works for you, then incorporate that. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Pomodoro technique basically states that you study for like I think 30 minutes, you set a timer, and then you take like a 5-minute break, and then you rinse and repeat. But you don't feel that you have to stick to a strict schedule, a break-taking schedule, especially since sometimes when you're in the flow while studying, you don't really want to quit and like sort of like mess up like your vibes, to put it simply. So figure out when you start to zone out, right? This could be like 30 minutes into studying, an hour into studying, maybe even an hour and a half, right? The point where you're not really remembering information anymore or your eyes are just burning. Take like a 10 to 15 minute break. Do an activity that doesn't require like a crazy amount of time, like maybe like make a snack, watch like half of an episode, talk to a friend real quick, text a friend real quick. Maybe if you have like, I don't know, some chore to do, like washing the dishes, or maybe you need to like clean up your desk a little bit, just find something to do, or just lie down on like your bed for a bit. Whatever helps you feel relaxed and rejuvenated, and then go back to studying, rinse and repeat. So again, this doesn't have to be on a strict schedule. Just follow whatever your body, whatever your brain needs. And of course, this will only work to a certain extent. Think like 2 to 3 hours max. After that, you're done for the day. You cannot study like 12 hours straight. You may think you can, and you could definitely do it, but you're really not going to retain information, I would say, after about 3 to 4 hours of studying. It just relates to how much information our brains can store into our long-term memory and retrieve it back. So if you need more than 2 or 3 hours to study for an exam, plan out your days ahead of time. But that's it for me. Just some big takeaways from this. Try your best to avoid doom scrolling by putting restrictions on your phone, setting up mental roadblocks. You can avoid other distractions by using music or finding some quiet spots on campus or around your neighborhood to study. And incorporate breaks because you will need them if you want to study and retain information the best. So yeah, that's everything I can give you in regards to trying to stay locked in. I've been your host, Hemish. This has been another episode of the Earle Lab. And as always, make sure to mind up each and every single week. Alright, see you guys next week. Take care.